I'm not gonna talk about it anymore.
The scientists of the Marvel Universe don't really have a problem creating super soldiers. They just can't seem to create more than one at a time that doesn't also end up hating their guts. Ever since a scrawny Steve Rogers volunteered to be a guinea pig for a super science upgrade to his physique, the Marvel Universes have been a string of science experiments to recreate Dr. Erskine's success. Some big names have come out of attempts to recreate the super soldier program, but one name wasn't as well known and reveals a troubling history of the attempts to make super soldiers: Isaiah Bradley. Post-blip life for Sam Wilson and Bucky Barnes has been a little hectic. They were only awake for a few minutes before the Sorcerer showed up recruiting everyone for the big showdown with 2014 Thanos, who had skipped ahead a decade when he really shouldn't have. Since then, Sam has taken on government contracts and struggled to keep the family fishing business afloat. Yeah, I said it. And Barnes has been trying to adjust to a life where he doesn't bust through walls and kill people in a menacing way. The hardest blow for both of Steve Rogers' besties, though, has been the fate of Captain America's mighty shield. Sam yielded that shield to the Smithsonian on the notion that the legacy of the shield was specific to the man who made it a symbol, and Wilson had a different legacy for himself. All of that only to find out that the military had already handpicked their replacement for Steve Rogers in the form of John Walker. They didn't get time to dwell on that betrayal before encountering a group of super soldiers. Noteworthy because usually super soldier programs end up as one-and-done kind of deals. That's when Bucky decides it's time to introduce Sam to someone who knows a thing or two about being denied the mantle: Isaiah Bradley. While Steve Rogers went into the ice for an extra long winter's nap, Bradley continued on as a super soldier at least into the Korean War, when he encountered a Hydra-aligned Bucky Barnes.
I whooped your ass.
The existence of Bradley is a shock to Sam and would be to just about anyone else. There have been some notable mixed results in the attempt to recreate the super soldier program. Bucky is the product of Hydra's attempts. Bruce Banner's Smash Your Half is Thunderbolt Ross's attempt. But no one seemed to know about Bradley, who was perhaps the closest thing to a Steve Rogers success. That's because Bradley spent 30 years imprisoned by the country he served, being alternatively experimented on by the government and Hydra, who had infiltrated S.H.I.E.L.D. That's gonna make anyone a bit angry. Bradley's time as a super soldier is done, and his former foe and an Avenger aren't going to change his mind. Just like in the MCU, the comic book story of Isaiah Bradley is one of the early examples of Project Rebirth and some of the less than respectable measures they've taken in order to create the perfect soldier. Project Rebirth is the name of the project built around Dr. Erskine's super soldier program. While the formula he managed to distill has been replicated a few times, no one has been able to get his Vita Ray activation process. Spoiler alert, gamma radiation is not a good substitute. The project would eventually become a part of the Weapon Plus program that would experiment on a testy Canadian mutant, who of course wrecked the place and hated everything to do with the place. While the Weapon X experiments were horrifying, Project Rebirth had been doing ethically horrible things almost from the start. With the program designed to create an army of soldiers, it only created the one Captain America. 300 black American soldiers from Camp Cathcart were experimented on without their consent in a story that was meant to echo the real-world Tuskegee Study, where syphilis tests were performed on black soldiers without their knowledge over the course of 30 years. The project resulted in 5 super soldiers, with the rest of the camp killed to cover up the experiment, with Isaiah Bradley being one of them. While Steve Rogers got all the pomp and glory, the 5 Camp Cathcart super soldiers were deployed in tough missions that would eventually see Bradley as the last one standing. Bradley is eventually scheduled to back up Captain America on what would otherwise be a suicide mission. But when Captain America is delayed by weather, Bradley dons the red, white, and blue and takes on the mission himself. After being captured, he's offered the opportunity to be a propaganda tool for the Germans, but refuses. Before the Germans can start experimenting on him, he's rescued by resistance members, only to be imprisoned by the US government, who of course experiments on him again. In the 21st century, Captain America finally meets Bradley, who had become a legend in the black community, but almost unknown otherwise. There's more to Bradley's legacy that might provide some clues to his future in the MCU, and we might have already met him. Bradley has been living in Baltimore with his grandson. Elijah knows what his grandfather's legacy is and what he was denied better than anyone else. Elijah's uncle and Isaiah's son also took on the super soldier mantle as Josiah X, and Elijah took up the shield as the Patriot. Initially, Elijah faked inheriting his grandfather's super soldier status before being convinced that his skills and intelligence is enough. Then he gets a blood transfusion from Gramps and gets that super soldier boost, leading the Young Avengers. Elijah joins a few other Young Avengers who have made their MCU debut. Cassie Lang, Scott Lang's daughter, becomes the size variable Stature. Kate Bishop is set to get her Hawkeye training from Clint Barton in the Hawkeye series. Miss Marvel will be getting her own series, as well as Ironheart, who may step in for Iron Lad. We likely haven't seen the last of Bradley in Falcon and the Winter Soldier, as it deals with social inequities even in the superhero world. But we're also likely to see his grandson get the recognition that he was robbed of at the hands of Project Rebirth. For a project that has spanned decades, you'd think someone at Project Rebirth and its offshoots would stumble on the concept of taking their time and following regular testing protocols. Sure, rogue experimentation can get results, but those results usually want to smash everyone in the face right away.